He looked like just another homeless man in the rain, shivering, silent, forgotten. But when a kind nurse brought him inside, she had no idea the man she was helping wasn't who he claimed to be. And the secret he was hiding would shake the entire hospital to its core. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from all around the world. Now let's jump into the story. The rain fell in heavy sheets, making the hospital parking lot look like a blurry painting. The night shift had just begun, and the air smelled of wet concrete and distant lightning. Most people rushed indoors, shielding themselves with jackets or umbrellas. But Grace Rowan stopped. She stood near the emergency entrance, her soft brown hair already damp from the wind. In her nurse's scrubs and lightweight raincoat, she was used to long nights and sudden storms. What she wasn't used to was finding someone crouched under the overhang near the supply loading dock. A man, soaked to the bone, sitting with his back against the wall, knees pulled to his chest. Grace hesitated. Most would walk past. The hospital saw its share of people just looking for shelter. But something about this man made her pause. "Hey," she said gently, stepping closer. "Sir, it's freezing out here. Why don't you come inside?" The man didn't look up. His face was hidden by the shadow of his hood, water dripping from the edges. His clothes were threadbare, clinging to him like wet paper. His hands trembled, but he shook his head slowly. "I'm fine," he murmured. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in days. "Just need a place to rest." "You'll catch pneumonia out here," Grace replied, her voice firm but kind. "Come on, I can get you a blanket, maybe some tea." Still, he didn't move. Grace knelt down, ignoring the rain soaking her knees. "I work here," she said, nodding toward the hospital doors. "Let me help, just for tonight. You'll be warmer, and no one will bother you." The man finally looked up. His eyes were sharp and dark, full of something she couldn't quite read. Not fear exactly, something deeper. Worn, but aware. A few moments later, Grace was guiding him through the staff entrance quietly, without drawing attention. The hallway. Lights flickered overhead, casting pale shadows on the walls. "Here," she said, opening the door to an old on-call room near the janitor's closet. "It's not much, but it's dry." He stood awkwardly, dripping onto the tile floor. Grace grabbed a hospital towel, a warm paper cup of tea, and a spare gown. She handed them over, keeping her voice light. "You can stay here for tonight," she said. "I'll talk to admin in the morning. Maybe they can help with a short-term job. It's not glamorous, but cleaning works better than freezing." The man nodded slowly. "Thanks," he said. "Grace, right?" She blinked, surprised, then realized he'd read her name tag. "Yeah, what's your name?" A long pause, then, "Daniel." "Okay, Daniel, try to rest. You're safe here." Grace smiled softly and stepped out. But before she closed the door, she glanced back. Daniel was sitting on the cot, upright, staring at the wall. The tea remained untouched in his hands. Something about him felt off. Not dangerous, just strange. He didn't slouch like someone beaten down by life. His posture was straight, controlled. His eyes didn't wander, they studied. The next morning, Grace arrived early. She was surprised to find Daniel already dressed in hospital-issued scrubs, holding a mop and standing near the janitor's office. She raised an eyebrow. "Looks like you're part of the team now." He gave a faint smile. "Thanks to you." Over the next few days, Daniel worked quietly. He cleaned floors, took out trash, and kept to himself. Most staff barely noticed him, but Grace noticed everything. He was too good at this to alert. He moved with a kind of quiet precision that didn't match someone who'd been living on the streets. His hands were steady, nails clean and trimmed. And once, when he thought no one was watching, he studied the hospital floor map like he was memorizing it. Grace wasn't sure what to think. One evening, She saw Daniel wiping the break room counter. Not just cleaning, but aligning chairs, stacking cups evenly, folding the paper towels with care. "You don't have to clean in here," she said as she stepped in. "I know," he said, calm. "I like to keep things in order." Grace tilted her head. "You're not really who you seem to be, are you?" Daniel froze, cloth in hand, but she only smiled faintly. "Don't worry. Everyone's got a story. I just hope yours has a good ending." She walked out before he could say anything. Behind her, Daniel stared at the reflection of his face in the window. Outside, the storm had passed. But something had just begun. Daniel Cross had blended in well. Too well. A week had passed since Grace found him out in the rain, and now he walked the hospital halls, pushing a mop bucket like he belonged. He wore the scrubs. He kept his head down. He smiled politely. No one questioned him, but not everything was what it seemed. Every time Daniel moved through the hospital, he watched. He noticed how long it took the night nurse to restock medication. Carts. He counted how many boxes were in the delivery room one morning and how many were gone the next. He memorized names, door codes, routines. He wasn't just cleaning, he was collecting. Grace, meanwhile, tried to focus on her work. But something about Daniel stayed on her mind. The way he stood a little too still when he thought no one was looking. The way his eyes scanned the nurse's station like he was reading invisible blueprints. She didn't want to be suspicious, but curiosity had a way of creeping in. Then one afternoon, Kelsey Moran walked in. She looked tired, shoulders heavy, eyes red. She clutched a photo in one hand and a small folder in the other. Grace met her in the hallway near the nurse's desk. "Can I help you?" Grace asked kindly. Kelsey hesitated. "You were here a few months ago, right? On the night shift?" "Yes. Most nights, actually. My daughter was admitted here." Casey Moran. She handed over the photo. A smiling girl, maybe 23, in a college sweatshirt. She had surgery, minor stuff. A few days later, she was gone. Grace's smile faded. She did remember Casey, a post-op infection. Everything had happened so fast. "I'm so sorry," Grace said. "They said it was complications. But no one will give me real answers. Look at this." Kelsey opened the folder. Her medication records. Something's missing. The batch number of one drug isn't even listed. And the doctor who approved it. He won't return my calls. Grace scanned the papers, confusion tightening in her chest. This ... This doesn't make sense. Kelsey looked at her with pleading eyes. "Can you help me, please? I know something's wrong, but I'm just a mom. No one listens to people like me." Grace didn't know what to say. She promised to look into it. But as Kelsey walked away, the unease settled deeper. That night, Grace stayed late, reviewing old records. She checked the database. The drug Kelsey mentioned, Zelmanex, wasn't on any inventory list. At least not anymore. "Looking for something?" came a voice. She turned, startled. Daniel stood at the hallway corner, mop in hand. Double quotes, just ... "Going over something," she replied. Daniel stepped closer, his face unreadable. "Zelmanex, right?" Grace blinked. "How do you know that?" Daniel lowered his voice. "Because that drug's been removed from every database in 3 hospitals across this state. And all of them had sudden patient deaths like Casey's." She stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He glanced around, then stepped into a storage room. She followed. "I wasn't completely honest with you," he said quietly. "I'm not homeless. I'm not even really a janitor." Grace backed up slightly. "My name is Daniel Cross. I used to be a medical compliance lawyer. Now I work with a private investigation group that looks into hospital corruption, drug trials, falsified records, hidden payouts." She crossed her arms. "And you used me to get in?" His voice softened. "I never planned to involve anyone. But that night, you helped me without asking for anything. And once I got inside, I saw more than I expected. This hospital has a problem, Grace. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Inside were pages of dates, notes, supply logs, all handwritten. Counterfeit drugs are being given to patients. Zelmanex was pulled from trials years ago, but it's showing up again, under different names. Someone here is covering it up. Grace stared at the notebook. Her hands trembled. Why didn't you just go to the police? I have before, Daniel said. Twice. Both times, the story was buried. Evidence disappeared. This time, I wanted to be sure. This time, I wanted someone on the inside I could trust. She looked up at him, hurt in her eyes. So you used my trust? He didn't flinch. Yes, and I regret that. Grace didn't speak for a while. Her thoughts raced. The hospital had always felt like a place of healing. Now it felt like a lie. Finally she whispered, What do you want from me? Nothing you don't want to give, Daniel said honestly. But if you help me, we might save someone from ending up like Casey. The silence hung between them. I need time, Grace said. Daniel nodded. That's fair. That night, Grace didn't sleep. She lay in bed, replaying every detail. Kelsey's tearful eyes, Casey's photo, Daniel's notebook. And one thought kept returning. What if the people she trusted were the ones doing the most harm? Grace didn't know when it happened, when her hospital stopped feeling safe. The quiet hum of machines, the soft beeping of monitors, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, all of it now felt like background noise hiding something darker. She hadn't told anyone what Daniel had revealed. Not Nurse Patel, not even her supervisor. She still didn't know if she should trust him fully, but she had started watching more closely. And what she saw made her uneasy. Medications disappeared and reappeared, with different labels. Patients with minor issues suddenly needed serious care. The pharmacy logs didn't match the delivery reports. It wasn't just one mistake, it was a pattern. Grace met Daniel again late one evening near the back hallway. The lights flickered above them, and the corridor was empty. I've checked 3 different carts, she whispered. The same drug, different names. Same code, and it's the one from Kelsey's file. Daniel nodded, already holding his notebook. It's spreading. They're moving fake meds through different names so no one notices. Grace's heart pounded. What are we going to do? We gather everything, he said. Records, photos, staff names, schedules. Then we take it public. But we have to be careful. They're already hiding evidence. If we're caught, it's over. She looked at him, searching his eyes. Why? Are you really doing this, Daniel? He hesitated, then said quietly, My sister died 5 years ago. Bad reaction to a drug that was supposed to help her. Turned out it was never approved. No one was held responsible. Grace's voice softened. I'm sorry. That's why I do this, he said. No one else should have to lose someone because of money. From that moment, Grace made her choice. They became a team, 2 shadows moving carefully through the hospital's routines. Grace used her staff access to slip Daniel into rooms after hours. She pulled patient charts, scanned documents, and flagged irregular logs. Daniel, meanwhile, hid a camera in his cleaning cart, snapping pictures of storage rooms and supply closets. One night, Grace entered the restricted pharmacy with her badge. Daniel followed, wheeling in his mop bucket as cover. Inside, shelves of medication lined the walls, cold, clinical, and terrifying. Start here, Daniel said, pointing at a cabinet labeled off-rotation inventory. Grace opened it, her hands shaking. Inside were bottles new, sealed, but the labels looked wrong. Too fresh, too clean. Daniel photographed each one. Look, he whispered, pointing to a sticker on the bottom. No batch number, just a code. These aren't traceable. Grace swallowed hard. People are taking these. Daniel moved quickly, opening drawers and snapping more pictures. In a hidden drawer, he found a list of weekly discounted Deliveries, some going directly to the office of Dr. Silas Reeves, the hospital director. Found something, he muttered. Grace's eyes widened. He's the one ordering this stuff? Looks like it. They heard a sound outside, the creak of a cart being pushed. Hide the notebook, Grace whispered. They left as quietly as they had entered, hearts racing, knowing they had just taken a huge risk. Later that night, in the break room, Daniel laid out everything they had so far. Photos, documents, receipts. They spread it out on a table and stared at the mess. We're missing one thing, he said. A clear connection. Proof that the director knows what these drugs are. Proof that he's covering it up. Grace frowned. You think he's doing it for money? I think he's doing it to hide his mistakes. Or worse, to profit off them. The next morning, Grace was called to Dr. Reeves' office. She knocked once, then entered. He was calm. Too calm, Miss Rowan, he said with a practiced smile. Interesting hours you've been keeping lately. She felt her throat tighten. I've been working overtime. Helping cover shifts, he nodded. Yes, and accessing rooms you don't normally need to be in. Late-night pharmacy visits. Late-night company. Her breath caught. Dr. Reeves placed a folder on the desk. Inside were still images, security footage. One showed her and Daniel entering the pharmacy. He looked up. You've been very busy. I can explain, she began. But he raised his hand. No need. You're not in trouble yet. He leaned forward. I'm offering you a way out. Keep quiet, and no one loses their job. You walk away, this never happened. And if I don't? His smile faded. Then you and your friend will be reported for theft, tampering, and worse. I can end your career with one email. Grace stood still, stunned. You're threatening me, she said. I'm protecting my hospital, he replied. Smoothly. You're a good nurse, Grace. Don't throw it all away. She walked out, her hands clenched. But in her heart, something had changed. Fear was still there, but so was anger. That night, she met Daniel in the old supply closet and told him everything. We have to go public, she whispered. Now, before he finds a way to erase it all. Daniel nodded. I agree, but we have to do it smart. We need someone on the outside. Grace opened her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. Already done, there's a reporter. She's waiting for our confirmation. One email from us, and it's out there. Daniel stared at her, surprised. You really did all that? I'm a nurse, Grace said. I notice things. And I fix what's broken. They stood in the quiet of the closet, the air heavy with everything at stake. We're going to blow this wide open, Daniel said. Grace met his eyes, steady and sure. Let's make it count. The email was sent at 6:14 a.m. One simple message, attached with files, photos, and handwritten notes. Grace and Daniel sat together in the corner booth of a quiet diner, hands wrapped around cups of lukewarm coffee. Across from them, on the small screen of Grace's phone, a reply lit up from a local journalist named Maria Voss. Received. Publishing by noon. Stay safe. Everything changed after that. By lunchtime, the story had hit every local news site. By the afternoon, it spread to national headlines. Hospital director Dr. Silas Reeves was accused of ordering counterfeit medications and covering up dangerous drug use inside the hospital. Patient families came forward. Former staff spoke up. Whistleblower evidence was now public and impossible to ignore. Grace was called into human resources that same day. She was escorted out of the building by security. Her badge was taken. Daniel followed soon after, told to leave and never return. But neither of them hung their heads, because 30 minutes later, every TV in the city flashed with the words, hospital, scandal, counterfeit medications, cover-up exposed. Daniel sat in his small apartment, watching the story unfold on TV. Grace was beside him, scrolling through updates. Dozens of families were speaking out now. One woman said her husband had received treatment that nearly killed him. Another said her child's medicine had been switched without permission. The public was furious. Protests formed outside the hospital. Government officials called for an investigation, and late that night, it happened. Dr. Reeves was arrested. He had tried to delete files, but Daniel's copies were too strong. The flash drive Grace handed over was filled with proof, email chains, delivery orders, forged invoices, all leading back to Reeves and the fake pharmaceutical supplier. In a live news segment, Maria Voss credited the anonymous whistleblowers. They were ordinary people, she said, a nurse and a janitor. But they chose to speak up, and they changed everything. Grace turned to Daniel, her eyes glassy with emotion. "We did it," she whispered. "No," he said. "You did it." A few months later, Grace stood in a courtroom. She wore a navy blazer and simple flats. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. She was called as a key witness in the trial against Dr. Reeves. In front of a quiet jury, she spoke of patients she had treated, families who never got answers, and what it meant to break her silence. "I became a nurse to help people," she said, voice shaking. But helping them meant standing up against the system that was hurting them, even when it was hard. She stepped down from the witness stand and sat beside Daniel in the back row. He squeezed her hand when the guilty verdict was announced. The room let out a long-held breath. Dr. Reeves was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The hospital board was replaced. The fake pharmaceutical company was shut down. But for Grace and Daniel, justice wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 1 year later, the rain returned. Not heavy or cold, but soft, like a quiet blessing. On a quiet street just a few blocks from the hospital, a crowd had gathered around a newly renovated building. Streamers fluttered in the wind. Folding chairs were set up outside. There were tables with coffee, fruit, and warm pastries. At the center of it all stood a hand-painted sign. Rowan House, Community Health for All. Grace stood at the front doors, wearing a light gray coat and her nurse's badge, which now read Director of Care. She greeted each person with a smile: patients, volunteers, nurses from her old hospital, and even some strangers who had donated to help the clinic open. This new clinic, built from legal settlement money and community donations, offered free and affordable care for low-income families. Medications were approved and tracked. No shortcuts. No shady deals, just care. Grace looked out over the crowd. Her heart was full. Then Daniel appeared beside her, adjusting his tie awkwardly. "Still not used to this," he muttered. "You look fine," she smiled. He cleared his throat and stepped up to the microphone. "I wasn't supposed to speak," he began nervously, "but if you know Grace, you know she's hard to ignore." Soft laughter rolled through the crowd. "She found me in the rain. I had a secret. I had a mission. But I didn't expect to find someone who would remind me why I started in first place." He paused and reached into his pocket. From it, he pulled out a small folded cloth, a white handkerchief. He opened it slowly. On the corner, stitched in blue thread, were the words, "Kindness costs nothing." "I had this made the week after." She brought me inside. I didn't know why. I just knew I needed to remember her. The crowd was quiet. Grace stepped forward, eyes wide. "I've lied," Daniel continued. "I've made mistakes. But this clinic, this moment is real, because of her, and I wanted to ask." He bent to one knee. Gasps echoed. "Grace." Covered her mouth with her hand. "Grace Rowan," he said, voice cracking. "You pulled me out of the storm into the light. Will you marry me?" She stared at him for a long second, then laughed, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Yes," she sighed, her voice full of joy. "Yes, Daniel, I will." The crowd burst into cheers. Some cried. Some clapped. But Grace only saw Daniel. They embraced in the soft rain, surrounded by strangers who now felt like family. A moment born from pain, now wrapped in hope. And so, what began as a silent storm became a loud and shining promise. Kindness may not save the world all at once, but it can save someone. And sometimes, that's how the world begins to change.